Listen, my guest today kind of goes without much of an introduction. Although many of you may know him for his acting role, you may not know him for his musical interests, and we're going to get into that uh, with him. But my guest today is the great Michael Imperioli. So, welcome, Michael, to the show.
Thank you for having me, JJ. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're in California right now?
I'm on West 72nd Street.
You're like right down the block.
I'm down the block.
Oh man, you could have come here and done it live. Okay, one day I'll actually do a live podcast with somebody actually here.
I could.
Are you relocated back in New York? You're living
Yeah,
out in California. Oh,
yeah. I moved back to New York a couple. Well, I mean, I moved back in stages. We moved out west in 2012. Just to, we moved to Santa Barbara. We didn't go to LA. We wanted to be in like a small town with good weather and finish raising our kids in a place where it was just us, so we'd have a lot of family time, which is exactly what we had. I was always on a plane working, very often, so it was a little tough, but it was nice. And then when the kids were out of the house, my wife and I were thinking, well, let's maybe it's time to go back to New York. I never really left because my family was here and I was always working here, so I was back and forth. Then 2019, I got a job here, so I got a place again, and then we earlier this year, we sold our place in California. Now we're here. Uh,
I was born and raised in Manhattan, and I'm actually in the apartment that I grew up in, and I'm actually in the bedroom that I grew up.
yeah. But you didn't have all
you
those
know,
gold records when you
no, no, I didn't. But
a little different.
but you'll appreciate this actually. When I got my first big amplifier, like when I was 17 years old, I brought it into this room where you're talking to me now, and I opened up the windows on the Upper West Side, and I'm in the 90s, and I'm blasting, I'm like smoking dope, but like the room looked like Chernobyl. My mother was out. I had a Gibson SG. I'm 17 years old. I have like a huge Marshall stack. I'm going crazy, and I'm just having the greatest time. And then the door is someone's knocking at the door. I went, man, got to be the cops, and I was so stoned. And I walk up to the front door and I open it. And there's a woman there, and she's standing there. She goes, "You son of a bitch! Do you know how fucking loud I trying to do my thesis for my PhD and I can't concentrate?" And I said, "I don't recognize you. What apartment are you in?" She goes, "What apartment? I live on 87 in Columbus Avenue." Only in New York.
That's great.
You gotta love it. So yes, most people know you as Christopher Moltisanti from The Sopranos or Spider from Goodfellas, but knowing what I've read about you and kind of watched you over the years and listened to you and especially your new music, and I hear the musician in you. I know that you wrote many episodes in The Sopranos and you're an actor. Is there one of the three things that are closer to your heart?
Um, various things have more of a personal connection. I've done more acting than I've done anything else. That's basically how I made my living. My adult life, most of my adult life. But even within acting, there are some jobs that are more personal than others. Some jobs that just mean a lot more than others. Some jobs you do because you're raising kids and you need income. I mean, Sopranos and projects like that are those rare opportunities where it all comes together. Where you're getting paid well. You couldn't be doing any better work on the planet at the time. You know what I
Yeah, you
mean?
kind of hit the lottery on that one.
Yeah, in every aspect. And then other jobs, you may be really creative, fulfilled, but you're getting paid peanuts, and that's okay. And other jobs, you might be getting paid decently, but the work is not great, and that has its place too. So the other stuff I've done, like a lot of the writing and the music, was much more just on a personal level. And theater. My wife and I built a theater, and we produced new off Broadway plays, new writers, and new plays. That's actually cost money. That we was we put money in. We didn't make anything back or profit or anything like that. But those things are personal, and you do them out of passion and out of love and out of fun. And so those things kind of tend to have more of a personal element to. So yeah, I always look at every project individually in terms of how close they are to my heart. You know what I mean?
So you and I met at a jazz event.
Jazz
um,
Foundation.
that Norita was working on, as a matter of fact, about 10 years ago. Um,
Yeah,
and that was, and Ron Carter was playing, as a matter of fact,
yeah.
that night.
Another
And
Upper West Side guy.
yeah, and so we kind of we met a little, quickly. Hey, how you doing? It was kind of cool, to be there. So I know that music is in your soul. But here's what I find interesting about actors, performers in general, um, as opposed to successful entrepreneurs and businessmen who tend to decide later in life what they want. Either they learned in college, or they dropped out of high school and did something, or they went to graduate school, or they took some bad jobs and realized they want to do something else. Most performers I know started really young. Like they saw something when they were 3, 4, 5 years old. And, like I can't tell you how many people say to me, oh, when I was 3, I went to my mom took me to see Annie, and I went, I need to do that. So was it that for you? Was it always, was there a movie? Was there something that tripped the wire in your head that said, this is the path that I'm going to take, and I will risk everything that I own to get there?
There are a couple of things. Midnight Cowboy really stands out as something that did that. I saw it at a very young age, probably too young. Probably did a little damage.
I was going to
Probably,
wonder, like, how young were you?
I think I might have been 8 or 9. My dad, it was on TV late at night. It was one of my dad's favorite movies, and he showed it to me. I guess it could today could be considered a form of child abuse, but
Yeah, did you understand the Brenda Vaccaro character?
much as I could at that. I mean, I knew it
Uh,
was something dirty and sexy
okay.
or whatever it was, but there was something about those characters, these outsiders, kind of the world against these lonely people. And I saw that also in Dog Day Afternoon. That was another movie that had that kind of little guy against the world kind of thing. I don't know why, but that kind of appealed to me. Also, the New York aspect of it, phenomenal acting and writing. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to act in those or write them or somehow, or I don't know what I wanted at that age. But I really didn't decide to go into acting till the last year of high school. And I just was reading a lot of plays, seeing movies, and was like, well, if I have to, because when you leave high school, you're supposed to make a choice. All right, I'm going to declare my major, which is basically declaring what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Right.
Which at 17, not everybody really knows. And when I was thinking about making that decision, I was like, all right. I mean, if I could do anything, it would be something in movies or TV or theater. And I thought I'll go to acting school, which I did. After high school, I went instead of going to college, I went to Lee Strasberg Institute,
Oh, okay. How
and
long did you spend there?
I was there 2 years, and then I quit at the end of the 2 years. I was 19, and I quit because throughout those 2 years, I was also trying to get an agent, trying to get roles, buying the trade newspapers like Backstage, and going to auditions for off Broadway play, and I couldn't get anywhere. And after 2 years, I was like, maybe this just ain't gonna happen for you. So I actually went down. You probably know this place, the Institute of Audio Research on
Mhm.
University Place, down in the Village, and got a brochure. Now I'm the least technical person. I'm the worst techie person in the world. I had no business even walking into that place. I don't know what I was thinking because I was also into music. I had played in a little band, but I was really bummed out basically. And I ran into a guy who used to be in my class, and he was with another teacher in a different acting school. He said, "You should come here." So I went there, and there were several people who were wind up being in The Sopranos. Now this is 1985. John Ventimiglia and Sharon Angela played Artie Bucco and Rosalie April. They were already there with this teacher Elaine Aiken, and from there, a bunch of us formed a theater group and started producing our own work. I started producing theater right around a little bit after that, and then directing theater and acting, and that became my peer group, and we still do stuff together, some of us.
Strasberg specialized in method acting. Am I correct
Yeah,
in that?
yeah.
Which is, for those who don't know, and again, you correct me because I'm not in the acting world, but from what I loosely understand, there's the Shakespearean style acting that you learn in England, which is you learn classical acting and through Shakespeare, and which is you do the role, then you take costume off, you go home. And then there's a method acting where you kind of imbue the character within you and you kind of live it in a way. And to the extreme where some character actors really carry that role when they're not on camera necessarily. Am I correct in
I mean, the way
or is
I would,
that too general? That's too
no,
general.
no, that's along the right lines. I mean, the way I saw it and what I was taught is it's basically a method of making imaginary circumstances real to you in a in the moment. Um, and that's really what it is. It's the whole thing of like gaining like 100 pounds for a role. That to me, that's kind of dieting. It's not really acting. I mean, it's going to alter how you do stuff and everything, but it's um, I wouldn't say that's really the method. That's not what they teach at Strasberg Actor Studio. It's really about these imaginary circumstances that you find yourself and making them real to you, and also using your own truth on stage. That's really. It doesn't mean you're going to stay in character 24 hours a day for the 3 months you're shooting. I mean, I worked with Robert De Niro in Goodfellas, and it was not like he was Jimmy Conway, the whole time. I mean, you could see he would between takes, he'd laugh, whatever, he'd go make a phone call, and and everyone thought of him as the method guy of the century, which he was, but he was not like he wakes up in the morning and he's Jimmy Conway. You know what I mean? So that's what it is.
And Brando was part of that school originally in the
Brando was
50s.
part of the Actors Studio, which Lee Strasberg founded along with
Mhm.
a couple of other people. And I mean, what Brando did really was start to bring this naturalistic um, behavior to the screen. If you watch a lot of movies before Brando, it's like snappy dialogue, and some do it better than others, like Cagney. But this whole like hesitation and kind of just like not being aware that you're on camera. I mean, Brando took everything to naturalism and realism to a whole other level that was very shocking to people, and most people had not seen anything like that.
So he kind of broke ground for that.
I
Yeah.
really think so. I mean, if you go back and look at the early stuff, especially Streetcar and On the Waterfront, it's really his work. Just it still leaps off the screen, and I think it less a testament to less a testament to method acting than it is a testament to his talent, right? Because it's the chicken didn't come before the egg. How they came up with a method of acting is watching good actors and trying to figure out, well, what are these people doing that everyone else is not doing? You know what I mean? It wasn't
Yeah.
like there was this method and then these actors followed it and became great. The method came by watching people who just had this natural gift.
So here's what I find interesting, and we're going to talk about your music because I think this is what's always puzzled me about actors who want to be musicians, musicians who want to be actors, and be taken seriously in both categories. In other words, and Streisand is one of the few who has successfully done it. I guess Whitney Houston, but to me, an actor is a clean slate who has to become something that a director wants them to become. Whereas a musician always gets labeled with, are you authentic or are you not? Like, are you real or are you not? The audience wants something real. They don't want to be fake. So if you're hung up on creating an image as a musician and you work so hard to be this thing that the public believes you are, like Madonna, for her to be an actor, she's so wrapped up in the narcissistic view of being Madonna that she can't be anything but Madonna when she's acting. And therefore her acting never really succeeded because the public didn't kind of buy it. Also, a lot of people who are actors, when they make records, people wonder, are they real? Because who are they really are? Is this something that you even think about, or have you ever thought about how the public perceives those two?
Right. Well, I mean, despite Madonna not being taken seriously, she managed to do a lot of movies. Even despite all that, for better for worse. For me, it was like I started playing music right around the same time I started studying acting, with actually with one of the people I was studying acting with, who had come from playing in bands in Boston. When I was coming up in the early '80s in New York, I was around a lot of artists in downtown East Village, and there was a big cross pollination of a lot of art forms. Performance art came out of theater, but kind of stand up comedy, but kind of from the punk rock world, or kind of from the Andy Warhol scene. Look at like what came out of Warhol, and there were filmmakers who were who were making music, and vice versa. So I came out of that. It was not, and none of us were famous, right? So it wasn't like you're an actor now, you're trying music. We were just doing whatever we wanted to do. Um, but nobody really knew that, right? Not many people saw me play back then. I played, and then I sang in another band after that. Nobody really saw, and was played a few gigs downtown. Then you become famous, so now everyone's thinking, oh, now you're a famous actor, now you're becoming a musician, now you think you can be a musician. I just never separated those things. So this band now, Zopa, which began in around 2000, right before The Sopranos ended, I did have a lot of opposition and kind of, just people just perceiving, because The Sopranos was still such a big thing, kind of taking things in that light, like, okay, now you're just trying to do this. But I didn't let that stop me, just because I just loved it. And I love the two guys I played with are not actors; they are musicians, and they're really good, and we enjoy playing together. Um, but then we haven't played together in a while. We made a record a number of years ago, and it kind of sat on the shelf. But in
Did
the
you
last,
make it for a label, or did you just make a
no,
record and you were going to shop it, or just release it on your own?
we didn't even, we're releasing on our own. We're pressing some vinyl. This vinyl company is pressing it, with us. But what happened in the last year and a half, really through being on Instagram and then doing a podcast, is that a lot of Sopranos garnered a lot of younger fans in the last couple of years, like late teens, 20s, 30s. And through Instagram, I started connecting with a lot of these young people who started to learn about my musical tastes and my musical kind of history and other things I'm interested in. So now the whole music thing is being seen in a slightly different light, because people are having a little bit more of a context of my interest, rather than like, he's the soprano guy, now he's playing music. There's this whole other, you know, there's a lot of other things that I do, so, and people are becoming aware of it. And social media really has changed the game for me in that respect.
So I have a book coming out in September, and it's called Twisted Business, because I'm a manager, businessman who happens to play guitar. I started out wanting to be a rock star, and I guess, for better or worse, I guess I became it, but I didn't want to just be that. So I started concentrating on the business side, and I became more of a business person. And now I do keynote speeches, motivational speeches, have a book. I teach the twisted method of reinvention. And reinvention is the key to all life, because we have to reinvent ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you die. And you reinvent yourself starting public school, going into junior high school, you're reinventing yourself. High school, going to college, you may not realize it, but you reinvent yourself. College, into the real world, you've reinvented yourself again. Performers reinvent themselves all the time.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. And reading about you and listening to your record, I realized that. So it hit me as authentic. So that's why I wanted to ask you about it, because here's what happened when I listened to your record. I'm sitting here and I'm going, my God, Lou Reed, this is a New York album. This is a New York record. This is really a New York record. In Twisted Sister, I was the Lou Reed guy. I sang all the Lou Reed songs. So I did Walk on the Wild Side, Sally Can't Dance, Heroin, Sweet Jane, and Vicious. Those are the songs that I sang. Okay. And the period that Lou Reed affected me the most, which was post Velvets, right around 72 when Transformer came out. Bowie comes out, Mata Hoople comes out. The three records together are all stitched together by David Bowie, because he wrote All the Young Dudes, produced Transformer, and
Mick
Ronson is everywhere. And bingo, I'm thinking Bullseye for you.
Well, those are three huge musical forces for me, between Mata Hoople, Bowie, and Bowie, Ronson, and Lou Reed. Yeah, I mean, it's those are some of my heroes and inspirations. I've yet to see Mott the Hoople, unfortunately, but they're still doing shows, so I have that opportunity. I did get to see Bowie. I saw Lou Reed several times, but yeah, that's kind of my wheelhouse. I also love T-Rex a lot.
This is the period that we come from.
That period was very rich,
was incredible. In fact, I say to people, the Beatles may have been my Saturn V rocket, but Bowie was my retro rocket. Like the Beatles took me to from 15, from 10 to 20. And then Bowie took me from 20 to the stars. You know, what happened in 72 in my life was very much affected by T-Rex, Bowie, all that stuff. So you should know, we opened for Mott the Hoople in 1973.
Wow, really?
Yeah, at the Sunshine Inn in Asbury Park, because the place was owned by some, you know, an interesting character but the guy who owned the concession stand was the brother of my agent, Lou Manganello. So he said, I can get Twisted to open for Mott. So we opened for Mott in 1973.
So when did you guys form?
73.
73.
So I'm celebrating my 48th year in the band right now.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, 48 years ago. It's crazy.
And the big hits started coming in the
84. So the 12 years later or 11 years later. So we struggled crazily. The story's kind of known, but yeah, we had played, by the time we got our record deal, we had about 6,000 shows under our belt.
Jesus. Did you start out as a bar band?
Yeah, well, but we were a glam band, you know? And so we started out as a straight, I'll tell you straight up, we tried to look like the Dolls because we thought they looked great. We just didn't think they played too good. So we wanted to be a Jersey version of the New York Dolls. That's how the band started. And immediately in 73, well, to give you some context with Bowie, just so you know, I saw Bowie's first show at Carnegie Hall in September of 72. At that show, seeing Mick Ronson, I cut my hair the next day and got it dyed blonde.
Was that Ziggy or no?
That was just, they had just debuted Ziggy, but they had no stage set. So they just came out on stage at Carnegie Hall, played Ziggy album, a couple more songs, and then played 2 Chuck Berry songs to finish the night, which I thought was a bit weird, by the way. I thought it was weird, not that they didn't play it well. I just thought in the context of the look, the fact that they played a couple of Chuck Berry songs was a bit weird. And years later, we were on tour with Uriah Heep, and Trevor Bolder was the bass player for Uriah Heep. And I walk into an elevator on the way to the gig, and there's Trevor coming back from the festival. He's in the elevator, and I look at him, and I go, Trevor Bolder. He goes, yeah. I said, JJ, Twisted Sister. I said, man, I just got to tell you, I know you hear it a million times, but I just got to tell you, I saw you and the Spiders, Carnegie Hall, 1972, but tell me true or false. You played a couple of Chuck Berry songs at the end, didn't you? And he goes, yeah. And I said, why? He said, because we ran out of material. So, how cool was that, right?
Well, they just played something they knew really
well. They played Round and Round and Johnny Be Good or something like that. Was it, right? Because everybody knows them. Okay, Mick called him out. Anyway, so I saw Bowie there. I saw him at Radio City 2 months later. In fact, the day Twisted Sister called themselves Twisted Sister, which was February 14th, 1973, that was the night that I saw Bowie at Radio City. So we could work back in those days. You worked as a bar band 6 nights a week, 5 shows a night. That's how you worked. 5 40-minute sets a night. 5 sets. Yeah. So 6 nights in one room. And usually these rooms, Michael, if you can think back now, most of these guys who own these rooms were leftover guys from the 40s and 50s, you know, who were still like in the clubs, like lower rung kind of guys. And so they didn't like rock and roll too much, but they had to put up with whatever we were doing. But when they had the opportunity to have a show band, they would bring in Little Anthony and the Imperials. They would bring in the Coasters. So we would open for Little Anthony and the Imperials, and we would open for the Coasters. And it was surreal. But when people ask how you get good, well, when you work 30 shows a week, which is 5 shows a night, 6 nights a week, you do that for a year or 2 years, guess what? You got 2,000 shows under your belt in 2 years. And that's how you got good.
Yeah. What, did you start out as a cover band or?
Total, 100%.
100%.
100%. Bowie, Reed, Mott, some Rolling Stones, a couple Alice Cooper songs. And the original band was not the band that made it. The band that made it was the 14th version of the band.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm the only original guy. So it started out.
Singer. He was not the original
lead singer. Eventually, he's the guy who named us. He was an alcoholic. They all were alcoholics, by the way. I didn't know what I was entering. I didn't know because I didn't drink. I came from Manhattan. We just smoked weed and took acid. I didn't know a thing about alcohol. And they were just drinkers, like heavy duty drinkers. And the band fell apart because of the alcoholism. But the singer, Michael, it sounds ironically funny and not to be funny, but one day he was walking out of a bar drunk and got hit by a car and got permanent brain damage.
Jeez.
But that was after we had fired him for pulling a loaded gun out on the drummer in a bar fight, which ended the band. The second singer that replaced him was a Rod Stewart clone singer. And so we switched the image at that point to 975.
Sounded like Rod too.
Like Rod, he sounded just like Rod Stewart.
Wow.
So we did Faces and Believe It or Not, When a Man Loves a Woman by Percy Sledge, because he was a very soulful singer. He sang great. He lasted 9 weeks. He was a meth addict and he disappeared. And I ran into him years later and he said, man, that year I was with you was really good. I said, buddy, you weren't with us for a year. You lasted 9 weeks. Okay. Nine weeks. All right. Then I took over singing. Now, Michael, you will appreciate this. I'm not a singer. That's why God created Lou Reed for me. So I could do cover material. So I did a lot of Lou Reed and my agent went, it's not happening. You have to do Zeppelin. Find a guy who sings Zepp. Save your ass because you guys are dying. I hired D. D sang Zepp perfectly. D joins and G goes.
How'd you find him?
He was in the bar scene. Bar scene was very healthy in those days. What you were born in 66, correct?
Yeah.
So in 1966, when you were born, I had already gone to my first rock show to see the Animals. I was 14 at the time. So I'm 68 now. So I have a couple of years on you. But the bar scene in those days, the drinking age was 18. So you missed out on that whole period of time.
I had a year or two of that. And then it changed to 19, and then I hit 19, then it moved to 21. So I was able to drink for a year and then I wasn't for like 2 years.
So here's the thing. The atmosphere that I grew up in allowed you to learn on the job, which doesn't really exist these days for bands. That kind of, putting COVID aside, just talking about bars, working bars. So we were able to learn by doing in the same way that you followed your dream. But I'm curious about this in your bands. When you jammed with your musician friends and you were trying to get that together, were you writing originals or were you doing Lou Reed or Rolling Stone songs or what were you playing?
Only originals, really.
Always originals.
Yeah, because, it was kind of when I started playing music, it was the early 80s. So it was really that whole DIY, punk and post-punk thing. So it was, you were just feeling the freedom to do whatever you could do with your ability at the time, rather than like learn, it was a different way of playing, it was a different approach that a lot of people were doing in New York at the time, on the Lower East Side and in the East Village and stuff. And
what kind of guitar did you have then? What kind of amp?
I used to have a Telecaster. Actually, the first band I was in, right? So I joined a band right when I literally bought a guitar. I started learning guitar, and then I was playing in this band, and I bought the cheapest guitar I could find. I didn't know anything about guitars, and it was like some nylon string acoustic guitar. And then I bought this little pickup for it, which I would plug into amplifiers in rehearsal studios and play kind of no-wave punk music. As I didn't really know anybody, I didn't have any money. And then eventually, a couple of years later, I bought a Telecaster, which I had to sell, which I really wish I had because it was like an 85 Tele that I bought at Matt Umanov's.
Were you into the Sex Pistols, Damned? Like, what was your Ramones? What was your listening?
More the New York scene, more like Ramones and New York Dolls and Television and Patti Smith. And
and you were down at CB's.
From not in the 70s, in the early 80s, from then on. But then when the current band formed in 2006, I started playing a Jaguar that I kind of modified a little bit and put humbuckers on.
You really modified it, didn't you? You didn't modify it a little bit. For those of you who just do not understand, Michael basically fucked up this guitar and changed it. Wait a minute. Whoa. Question. Why would anybody who owns a Fender, Jaguar, especially a Jaguar, put a humbucking pickup in the Jaguar? I thought you would like the way that the Jaguar sounded.
No, because that's what Kurt Cobain did.
Oh, you know what? I did not know. So he had a humbuck. Did he replace both pickups with humbucking?
Yeah. So
Interesting.
I kind of like that guitar sound, although my sound doesn't sound like that. But I don't know. Something that inspired me, and Rick Kelly on Carmine Street modified it. It's a '66 Jaguar, has all these crazy, you know,
Switches. And,
switches, and I had him bypass them all because I'm very, like I said, very low tech and just has volume and tone control. But yeah, you kind of fucked up the natural ability of the Jaguar, but it does have a very unique, rich tone and a lot of sustain, and it kind of has its own thing now, and if you know how to treat it right,
rosewood fretboard, not maple,
yeah,
correct?
Rosewood
Rosewood. And what kind of gauge strings you use?
10. I started out using 11s. Actually, Cobain used, I think, much heavier and kind of cut the nut a little bit to put bigger strings, but
Okay.
I didn't really like that too much. I use tens, and I have a Kendrick amp. Do you know those? Yeah,
Yes, I do.
tube amp, which is really cool. I basically the amp really is only kind of I like a rich, warm, clean sound, and then I do everything with pedals. Not that much really. I only have a few pedals that put the kind of textures to it. But the Jag, it's an old one, and it's kind of a Frankenstein thing a little bit, but it does have a unique kind of sound to it that I like, that I just got used to.
Yeah, Fenders are interesting because you've got the Strat and the Telly that everybody knows. Yeah, everyone knows Strat and Telly. And then you got the Jazzmaster, which was actually the most expensive Fender at the time. Did you know
Really?
that? Yeah.
Nice.
In 66, when I started playing in my little bands, if you had a candy apple red Jazzmaster with a matching headstock and a Fender twin amp, you were God. You
Wow.
were golden. You were a millionaire. That was the gold standard. Nobody was playing Strats. Okay. Nobody was playing Strats. All of a sudden, Jimmy plays a Strat in 67 and some light bulbs switched and everybody with the Jazzmaster traded. But if you look at the list prices, the Jazzmaster was the most expensive. The Jaguar was less expensive, and the Duosonic was even less expensive. And they were considered surf guitars,
Right.
and so a lot of alternative bands kind of like that kind of sound, So that was that was the genesis of the Fenders. So you had this guitar, and you were doing originals, and you just were jamming with the band, and
That was started in 2006. Yeah.
okay.
And, yeah, it just kind of developed over time, as things do, as you get more used to each other and connect with each other more. Um, and then we took, a number of years off. We had not played together. Actually, we were, um, and this record sat on the shelf, and then we put it out on Bandcamp several months ago, and started getting some interest, some people writing about it in different music press and blogs and stuff, because like I said, social media kind of put a different light on what I was trying to do, right? Social media has been really cool to be able to target your people, your fans, people have common interest to you without the filter of like PR, and it's, I think, an incredible tool.
I think the song Pink is a hit, by the way.
That's got a cool bass line, the bit.
Fucking great bass line, man.
Yeah, that's a really good
It
bass.
really moves.
Yeah,
It's really, really, really,
quite
really good.
quite talented. Elijah Hamilton's really good.
It's a great. It pushes really well.
Yeah.
It has a really good feel to it. So here's something I'm kind of curious about. Well, we'll talk about your jazz inclinations. We will talk about that because I want to understand, a little bit of your background and that stuff. But in the early days of The Sopranos, when the story arc had you as managing that rock band with Adriana, and you were dealing with Hesh trying to get him to sign the band, the actor, right, who was, I guess, playing the Morris Levy mob, Jewish mob guy. Okay, old enough to know the references.
That's Hesh is based on that.
Morris Levy.
100%. Yes.
Okay, so you got all that going on, and here's what kind of intrigued me as someone in the business: the conversations involving music rights were more complex than the average stupid movies talking about music rights. So you guys actually talked about publishing, mechanicals. You actually did that. Was that purposeful? Like, did you sit down with David Chase? Did you say, let's not just do the normal stuff? Let's be a bit more specific for people out there who may really appreciate that you're trying to be more specific about it?
Well, the at that point I was not. That was the first season. A hit is a hit episode, season one. I was not writing at that point on the show, so I didn't. But definitely they did. You know, this just one of the secret sauces of that show was their attention to detail, and it's something I really learned as a writer from David. Nothing is ever left general. Nothing is ever left unspecified. Everything in that script. Like if you write, a guy comes and delivers pizza to Tony Soprano, he's wearing a Mets hat and a Brazil soccer jersey, and he speaks and he has a limp. That guy better have those things on, and he better have that limp when they go to shoot that thing. And if it's not right, somebody's head's going to roll, because everything is important and nothing should ever just, a lot of television, and decent shows, cop shows, detective shows, it's all right. They don't pay that much attention to those details or those tertiary characters and stuff. Sopranos really did on every level. And exactly what you're saying, that research really would go into it. All right, how did this work? Let's call someone. Let's talk to someone. Let's figure out how it worked and then put it into the story very organically. And
Well, sure, it's Little Steven's on the set, so I mean, he knows all
that
this
helped.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he could give you, I'm sure, chapter and verse on the whole music industry, right? So that would work out perfectly.
Little Steven. I mean, you must have crossed paths in Jersey.
We were endorsed by the same company, Guild Guitars, in 1985. So we did a promotional thing with that. Then he produced a song by an artist I managed back in 1990. When did Kerry run for president? 1996 or 2000? Whenever Kerry ran, Springsteen did a benefit at Brendan Byrne Arena. Was it called that back then? And Stephen was producing an artist I managed, so he invited us down to the show. So we crossed paths.
Cross paths like at the Stone Pony.
No, because Twisted that wasn't our circuit, and Springsteen left that circuit before we succeeded. People don't realize that. Even though Springsteen learned everything he did from the circuit that we were on, he left the circuit by 72. He was no longer in the circuit. He was long gone. The biggest Jersey bands were Salvation, Superheat, Mother Flag and Country, all these other weird.
Southside, was he Southside Johnny?
Southside Johnny was around. Yeah, Southside Johnny stayed around. Southside Johnny still played clubs back in our day. Like he could play My Father's Place, play the Stone Pony. Twisted played the Stone Pony once, or there was another, the Fast Lane. I'm sorry, the Fast Lane. There was 2 rooms in Asbury Park that were opposites. One was the Fast Lane, was a Stone Pony. You played one or the other. And back in those days, as a bar band, we were a very highly paid bar band. So whoever paid us the most got us. Whoever felt we were of particular value. We had already sold out the boardwalk in Atlantic City with Judas Priest by 1979. So we already had a reputation. But no, we never ran across Bruce at all. He was up and gone. But just getting back to this thing. So I would know that Stephen would know all the stuff. And I was impressed at the specifics of the conversation about the record business, because it was really, and you're so right. If you're a cop and you watch a cop show, you go, it's not like that. If you're a doctor, you watch these, that's bullshit. 99% of the time when you watch a music show, I'm sitting there with my wife going, give me a break. It's nothing like this. Like, I don't know, who are they? Why? This is the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. It's never right. But the dialogue that took place on The Sopranos with Hayes was right.
It was definitely right. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How do you feel about like the last decade or more, something about like the American Idol, The Voice, those phenomenons, and like these people, most of them are very young, and it's like, just give me this big break and I'm going to become this star. And it's like, it's kind of avoiding all that, making your bones, finding your way, trying things out. What's your...
You mean not the 6,000 shows, not getting your ass kicked by every club owner in the world, not having your truck blown up, people getting fired, guys dying, ODing, girlfriends, equipment smashed by rival bands. You talking about that? Avoiding that? Is that what you're talking about? Michael, listen to me. Listen. Yeah. When we're on stage in Europe and we're doing these big festivals, so there's 100,000 people out there, I get on the mic and I always go, hey, everybody, I just want to say one thing, because every country has their own version of Idol. Right? Every country, Germany has German Idol, France has French Idol, England, everyone's got the same shit, right? Worldwide. And I always go, the difference between people who win that shit and us? People who win that shit go, I want to thank my fans for staying with me for 15 weeks. It's been an amazing 15 weeks. I will never forget it. I love you. And I get to say, I'd like to thank our fans for sticking with us for 35 fucking years. And that, to me, is the difference. So when I watch these kids hopscotch over what they have to learn, part of me is happy. The other part of me is, man, this is the worst possible thing that could ever happen to you. Not the least of which is the deals are bullshit anyway. These shows have nothing to do with you becoming a star. These shows have to do with ratings, advertisements. The Voice is nothing but a game show. And I don't think they even give a shit about the art. They could tell you they give a shit. They could tell you that they gave you a cell number, which, by the way, probably doesn't work if you try to reach any of them. I think it's nonsense. I think they build up in these kids when they all go, it's a life changer. It's every time I hear that, if I win this round, it's a game changer. I'm sitting
Like the
going,
lottery. It's like lotto.
And it's just not. I'll tell you something. How about this? You're an actor. Here's a good story for you. 1969, my bass player, Rick Lyon Quente, Dominican kid, his girlfriend's name is Linnea Heacock. We're at the fountain on 72nd Street, right? This is where we hung out. The Bethesda Fountain in Central Park. That's where all the hippies hung out in the late 60s. Everyone's on acid that day, like fucked up, like throwing an acid party. Everyone's on LSD, right? So his girlfriend, Linnea, has a water pistol, and she's running around the fountain, squirting strangers with a water pistol. She's 17 years old, right? Guess who's walking across the fountain? Milos Forman. He sees Linnea. He goes, I want you to be in my next picture. And he signs Linnea, and she stars in his next movie called Taking Off with Buck Henry. Okay? He stars in a major fucking motion picture with no acting experience whatsoever. She won the lottery, correct?
Yes.
This is the lottery, isn't it? After the movie was done, I asked her, isn't this the most amazing thing? And she said, I hate acting. I'm never going to do it again. And I just thought to myself, how many people would give their freaking baby to be in that position? So you tell me, when I hear that an actor goes to LA to try to make it, and the only reason why they got the job is because the agent said, oh, you got 20,000 more Instagram followers than the person I just auditioned, even though the person I auditioned is better than you. What do you think about that? I mean,
well, I mean, it's most of my colleagues or people that I came up with. And like I said, I was in class for 5-6 years, and I was trying to get work, trying to get auditions. I auditioned for a million things. Then I started doing theater. I mean, it took me at least like 8 years before I started paying my, bills as an actor. And then more, it's, paying your dues. It's the other thing is this, it's like, okay, so if you just all of a sudden decide you want to be an actor, someone hands you a role like that, and you avoid all those things like that you're talking about. Well, as an artist, I think it's part of being an artist is having lived, and not just lived in front of the American Idol cameras. It's having lived and gone through a struggle and pursued something and had your heart broken and gone through lean times and want to quit and pull your hair out and you don't get it and disappointment and rejection. I mean, that's I think part of the ingredients of what makes an artist unique. You know what I mean? It's like in a way you're doing these people a disservice by having them avoid. Not I don't mean avoid like horror stories, but just avoid like training, learning, experiencing. I mean, it's not. What do they? All right, so they have a good voice. There's a million people with a good voice. You know what I mean? It's like, what's going to make you special? The voice is only, what's going to make you special is what you're going to bring through that voice. How much honesty, how much truth, how much passion. What stories can you tell through that voice? You know what I mean?
By the way, it's not to say that people with good voices that don't have an authentic desire to be like a Dylan, who have something to say, can't be successful. You could be a great voiceover. You could sing for commercials. You can be on Broadway. They don't need you to be a star to be on Broadway. Meaning they don't need you to be the star of the show to be on Broadway. There's plenty of people with with talent that can do all this stuff. The thing I object to the shows is the construct of the theory of stardom as
That's
given to young people who cannot process it. This is the difficulty. Now, processing stardom is a bitch. And most people who attain it are not mature enough to understand that you do not own stardom. You rent stardom. That's all you do is you rent it. For as long as the public allows you to have it, you have it. How difficult, Michael, and how many cases or stories do you know of actors who had that flash, it disappeared, and then got totally depressed and
Oh, it's all the
wanted to
time.
kill
I
himself?
mean, people who get plucked out of. I mean, there's people who are not pursuing acting, like your friend that you described. I know someone who got discovered as a teenager on the beach, and had this big career, and very talented, but was not ready for those things, for whatever reason, because the luckily a lot of my colleagues that have gotten known and stuff, by the time it happened, they had already been working so much that it was, it was the acting meant more than that stardom. You know what
Then
I
the
mean?
process of stardom, right? Then
Yeah.
processing stardom.
It's
Yeah.
like, when if you're a rock band at 18 years old and all of a sudden you're like touring stadiums, it's like, well, there's no surprise that there's going to be drug abuse and alcohol abuse and, whatever, violence and craziness and all these things that could kill you, that could derail your career. Or and I think it's, the people who like writing, for instance. A lot of great writers say delay as long as possible, meaning, live, have a life, rather than just all of a sudden saying this, try to be prominent or try to be. I think it's kind of dangerous, actually, that phenomenon of American Idol and those things.
So when you got the role at Spider, how
Yeah.
old were you?
23.
What was it like when the movie came out for you, or the next couple of years after that?
Well, it was a really big deal. So at that point, I had been doing it 6 years, trying to get work and studying and all that, and it was a really big deal to be with those guys, just because they were, it was like,
Those guys.
yeah, it's playing for the Yankees in the World Series. So, but when we shot it, I had no idea. Is it going to stay in the movie? Are you going to get cut out? Is this going to work in the movie, or what's it going to be like? And I was still working in restaurants. I was working in restaurants after that movie came out. Um, the good thing was that everybody saw that movie. So now, as an actor, you have something to point to, say, I was the guy in this. And the year later, when the movie was about to come out, Spike Lee had seen a screening because he was friends with Marty, and then cast a bunch of people in Jungle Fever. A bunch of Italian actors who were in Goodfellas were in Jungle Fever. So it became easier to get, decent work. But it was still, there was still another couple of years, going back and forth between restaurant work and acting. And then finally it was like I was making enough to not have to do that anymore.
I just remembered something. The actress who played the gourmand, Gina, Ray Liotta's hooker girlfriend,
Yeah.
she was a waitress in a restaurant that I owned.
Gina Mastrogiacomo?
Yeah, yeah. She was a waitress who played Gina. She worked at a place called Mama's Pizza on 79th Street and Amsterdam, and I was a co-owner of it. And she was a waitress there. And
Wow.
she was there. Baldwin, not Billy Baldwin, the
Daniel?
younger Stephen Baldwin was also a waiter there. We're talking 80. We're talking
9?
89. Yeah, talking around 89. That's right. And she got discovered. I don't remember how, but I remember she told us about she was going to be in that she had been, in the movie, and it was like really great for her. But I will say this: when people say to me, "Do I regret that it took Twisted so long to make it?" I say no. I was at 32 when the hit records came, and I was much more able to handle it.
Of course. I was just looking
32.
something up because I didn't want to misquote this. But Gina, if it's Gina Mastrogiacomo you're talking about, she passed away.
She died. Yes, I'm aware.
That is her. I was just checking that.
Yes, it was her.
I don't
Right.
want to say that.
Yeah. So she was a waitress at the
I knew her a
restaurant.
little bit, yeah, from both from Goodfellas, and we did a movie together not long after that. But she was very good in
Yeah.
Goodfellas. She did a good job.
Well, yeah, she was really nice, and that was an interesting restaurant because there were a lot of people that hung out there that we kind of met. And like I said, I had a piece of the restaurant for a while, but I do remember her in that particular movie. So anyway, I was 32. I was much better able, and I didn't buy into the star stuff at all. So when the band really hit it big and I came back to the city after the first big world tour, the last thing I wanted was for anybody to talk to me about it, anybody to refer to me as JJ. You know, my name is John. You're on the Upper West Side. That's what you call me. In fact, if you really know me, if you went to high school or junior high school with me, you call me by my real last name. That's how I know if I've known you for 50 years in my neighborhood. Because the guys who know me from then, they go, yo, Segal, because my last name is Segal. And they'll go, yo, Segal, what's up? And that's how I know they know me. I just rejected the whole framework of it. And I'm kind of glad I did. The reason why is when it all crashed in 87, I went bankrupt, lost everything, wound up running a pool hall on 76th Street in Broadway called 21 Billiards overnights, and then wound up being a stereo salesman for the next 6 years.
What crashed?
Well, there was a big lawsuit involving, we took a gigantic advance in merchandising. We were the first $1 million merchandise advance act in the world, us, Springsteen, and Madonna. And Springsteen obviously did really well, Madonna really well. Our tour did not go well, and the band broke up, and they came back at us and said, we want our money. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. You took a shot like everybody else. You made $1 gazillion off of Springsteen. You made $1 gazillion off of Madonna. And they said, well, we want you. So they came after me and Dee. And Dee and I weren't talking anymore, but we both filed bankruptcy. So by 1989, I filed bankruptcy and lost everything. And I walked out of bankruptcy court on Bowling Green, kind of laughing at myself, going, hey, John, you're a real smart guy. Do you believe that you're bankrupt? Do you believe you have no? I had 2 guitars and a subway token. That's all I had left. And my stepmom gave me an American Express card, and a friend of mine gave me a job working overnights at the pool hall. And he said to me, I'm going to let you work at the pool hall, and if anybody asks why you're here, just tell them you're an owner. You're a working owner, so you don't feel bad. I mean, he understood what this meant to me. I needed the job, and then slowly but surely, I turned my life around and came back again with a band called Seven Dust. I produced them and managed them. They became very, 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 very successful. And so that was way more successful than Twisted, believe it or not, like way more. And then that ended with my second divorce. I have a crazy life. I mean, it's in the book, but you know, life is life. Okay. We all have these stories to tell, you know, life is life. And just when things looked really bleak again, after the second divorce, Twisted Sister reunited. And for 14 years, we were one of the biggest festival bands in the world. And it changed everything. And then from there, I started writing, and I started writing for magazines. And then I got a book deal. I got the podcast deal. And I do keynote speaking for businesses. That's what I do. I consult businesses, which, Michael, is ironic because I'm a high school dropout. Okay. So I am, like I get up and go, how many of you graduate college? How many of you have business degrees? How many have doctorate degrees? Okay. How does it feel taking advice from a high school dropout, former drug addict, former drug dealer, heavy metal rock and roll musician? Boy, did you guys miss out on all the fun. So it's all those experiences I had is what took me to what I do now. This is why I'm interested in what you do. So I want to talk to you about your music and your jazz especially. I want to understand your love is jazz, isn't it?
No, I love jazz, but I also love rock. I mean, and I like a lot of different music. I do love jazz, just because there's something very pure about it to me. You know what I mean? There's just there's not a lot of commerciality to it. It's most of the musicians are incredibly literate, in terms of music, and I just find it very special.
Well, here's what COVID has done for me. So I have a lot of jazz records. They were given to me when I was signed to Atlantic by Ahmet Ertegun, because, it started out as a jazz label. He gave me Ornette Coleman, Coltrane. I have a wall of great jazz, which I never listened to because I'm a rock guy, or I'm a blues guy. Actually, blues is my thing. I'm really steeped in the blues. I can listen to blues all day long. That's what I love. During COVID, I said, you know what? It's about time I start listening to this and understanding, because it never was a language I was familiar with.
All right.
So I've been playing. I've I've been playing a lot of jazz because I need to become familiar with it. I want to know an artist so well that when I hear him, I'll know it's him. Like when a guitar player plays, I can tell you who it is and what guitar he's playing, because that's what my ears tell me. After all these years, I'll tell you, I can almost tell you what year the guitar is built. That's how much I can do it. I want to be able to be that familiar with jazz. My father hated rock. He was a classical music guy. So my father could listen to QXR and he'd go, Schubert's Mass in F minor, Boston Symphony Orchestra, 1930s. I go, how the hell do you know that? He goes, well, your music's terrible. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, it's all the same shit after 1946. My father had a real simple answer for everything, Michael. He said, everything after 1946 was baby, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. That was him. Everything. You know what they say about country music? It all sounds similar. So my theory, which is not really a theory, it's just true. If you don't care about something, you don't care about it. So it all sounds the same. But if you care about it, you care about it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So blues is my classical music.
Yeah, I like blues a lot too. I mean, like you just put it in a really good way about it being its own language and having to tune yourself to that language. And some jazz is more impenetrable than others, a lot of the more experimental stuff, Um, but I got to see Miles Davis play once, which was I was young, but it was a really big experience for me, because he was doing his thing, and it was very much an individual artist expressing himself through that instrument, through that music, and it was very profound.
Before I let you go, question: how does a Italian Catholic become a Buddhist? And you got 1 minute to answer that question.
No, it's a good question. I can answer in a short period of time.
Okay.
There's a stretch between not being a Catholic and being a Buddhist. It's that period when you leave Catholicism as a kid and before you discover Buddhism and all these other things happen and you kind of realize a lot of your dreams, but but then at the same time realize that there's something missing, that success and money and recognition and all those things that you've pursued to some degree. I mean, you do pursue the work because you love it and you respect it, but those things definitely are not off your radar. That, okay, so now what? That there's some kind of inside job that has to still happen, basically.
Did you violate your parents' wish for you? Did they know it? Did it matter? They didn't care.
By then, no. I mean, they had already been through the worst of it, I think, with me. That was small potatoes.
I wish my parents were alive to apologize to them for what an idiot I was. But, I mean.
I've tried to do that, yeah. I mean, that's part of growing up. And what I like about Buddhism is it wasn't really substituting one religion for another. Buddhism to me is, and to a lot of people, a lot of people don't even look at it as a religion. It's more of like a science of mind, and it's a way of dealing with your own mind to, better go through life and interact with people and interact with the world. A lot of, Buddhism, like meditation and the teachings of Buddhism is dealing with your own mind. It's not really about, okay, I can't do this, I can't do that, I won't do this, I won't do that, I can do that. It's not really about that. It's really up to you to figure out how your mind works and to kind of try to get rid of the negative and try to bring in the positive. That's
do you want to just tell my listeners really quick before you go about your podcast with Steven Shrippa?
We do a podcast called Talking Sopranos that we've been doing for about a year, and it's an episode every week. We break down an episode in great detail, scene by scene, and talk about our impressions, our opinions, our memories, our stories. And most shows we have a guest. The new one that's out now has Frankie Valli as the guest, which is huge, talking about his life and his growing up in Jersey in the early days and the mobs who own the mob who own the clubs. And we have a lot of guests, both actors and writers and crew people. And it's also Steve and I, two buddies, kind of just giving each other shit and having a laugh at the same time.
It is fun. I listened to it and prepped for this, and I didn't want to belabor this conversation with Sopranos because people can get their Sopranos fix on your podcast. But I appreciate you being on the show. I appreciate you talking about your your life and your loves, and get the new album. Promote the album, by the way, please.
Yeah, go to Bandcamp.
Okay.
Zopa is the name of the band. The album is called La Dolce Vita, and it'll be out on vinyl soon. And you can follow me on Instagram to get updates on when the vinyl's coming out, when we have some shows coming out. It's Real Michael Imperioli on Instagram.
Great. Well, Michael, thank you for your time. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
I appreciate
And
it.
thanks to Norina